If you're renting a gateway from Xfinity as part of your internet plan, you're going to want to pay attention to this. It's more than likely that right now your Xfinity Gateway is broadcasting a second secret Wi-Fi network that you don't even know about. In this episode from Network from Home, we're going to be diving into this secret Wi-Fi network and what you can do about it. So to take it from the top, what do I mean here when I say that your gateway is broadcasting a second Wi-Fi network? Well, what I mean is when you first get your gateway and you set it up for the first time, you establish a Wi-Fi network name and password that this device will broadcast, and then all the devices in your home can connect to it and get access to the internet. When I talk about a second Wi-Fi network being broadcast by this device, I'm talking about a Wi-Fi network with a different name and a different password that this device is broadcasting and allowing other devices to connect to it. Now, this second Wi-Fi network is part of what's called the Xfinity Wi-Fi Hotspot network. And all this means is that Xfinity wants their customers, no matter where they are, to be able to access Wi-Fi and use the internet. So essentially, if you are away from your home and you're walking down the street, they want you to be able to access Wi-Fi and access the internet. Now, where is that Wi-Fi coming from? As you might have guessed, that's coming from the devices in our home. If you are renting an Xfinity Gateway, this Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspot is on by default, and this is the second Wi-Fi network that I'm talking about. Now, this all sounds great in theory for Xfinity customers. No matter where you are, you can access the internet through Xfinity's Wi-Fi hotspot network. But the fact of the matter is, some people don't want others accessing the internet through the gateway in their home. And especially in some cases, like mine personally, if you don't live in an extremely urban area where the houses are right next to each other, maybe you don't want somebody either sitting in their car or standing on the sidewalk outside of your home accessing the internet using your gateway. And on top of these initial concerns, I also have questions about the performance of my gateway and the security of my gateway if other people have access to it and are using it. So some of these concerns are addressed in the Xfinity Wi-Fi Hotspot Frequently Asked Questions document. At least they kind of are. I'll include a link to that in the description if you want to check that out. But the Xfinity Wi-Fi Hotspot Wi-Fi network is described as a Wi-Fi network that is completely separate from the one that you've set up for your gateway. And it's promised that there's no impact on the performance of your Wi-Fi when other people are using this secondary Wi-Fi network. However, if you look a little bit later in the Frequently Asked Questions document, it says, and I quote, "We have provisioned the Xfinity Wi-Fi feature to support robust usage, and therefore we anticipate minimal to no impact to the in-home Wi-Fi network." Now, I don't know about you, but even if there's minimal impact to the performance of the Wi-Fi network that I set up for my gateway, I'm not so sure this is something that I want. You may be more generous than I am, but I pay for an expensive internet plan that provides good speeds on a monthly basis. And I'm not so sure I want some stranger impacting those high Wi-Fi speeds if they're outside my home using the internet. And now from a security standpoint, even though these two Wi-Fi networks are completely separate, they're still using the same hardware. And to me, I can't help but think there's some additional security risk there. I guess what I'm saying is, I imagine there's probably more security risk with the two Wi-Fi networks using the same equipment than if it was just my Wi-Fi network using this gateway. On top of these technical factors, the other thing that I don't completely love is the fact that my gateway's been broadcasting this secondary Wi-Fi network the whole time, and I had no idea this was happening. I feel like it's not well communicated by Xfinity, and that doesn't exactly make me feel trustworthy of them. I'd love to see in the comments section if you're also just finding about this secondary Wi-Fi network, or for some reason if I missed something and this Wi-Fi network was communicated to you when you picked up your gateway. Now that we've talked about the concerns of this secondary Wi-Fi network, let's talk about what you can do about it. Well, the first thing you can do, if you want to check to see if this secondary Wi-Fi network is on, you can pull up one of your mobile devices and go to the list of available Wi-Fi networks. I'll show you how to do this on my phone and show you what you should be looking for. Okay, so on your phone, you want to go to General Settings. Then you want to go to the list of available Wi-Fi networks, so you select Wi-Fi. Give it a few seconds on this page, and then what you'll see under My Networks how it says Xfinity Wi-Fi. That's exactly the one that we're looking for here. This gives me an idea that that secondary Wi-Fi network is more than likely on in my gateway if I have a strong Wi-Fi signal to that secondary Wi-Fi. Now this secondary Wi-Fi network will be called Xfinity Wi-Fi for everybody, so that's the one you'll be looking for in your list of available networks. So what should you do if you see this Xfinity Wi-Fi network? Well, if you would like to, you can actually turn this secondary Wi-Fi network off. In order to do that, we need to go into the Xfinity app, so let's go in there now. You may be prompted to sign into your Xfinity account with your email address and password. This will be your email address and password that are associated with your internet plan. After entering that information, you'll be on this homepage, and what we want to do is go to Wi-Fi settings. Then we want to hit View My Equipment, then Advanced Settings, and then Xfinity Wi-Fi Hotspot. Now here, if you saw that Xfinity Wi-Fi network when you went to the list of available Wi-Fi networks, it's probably because this switch is toggled on. This switch was toggled on by default for me. In other words, what that means is as soon as I set up my gateway, it was broadcasting this secondary Xfinity Wi-Fi network. If you'd like to turn this off so your gateway is only broadcasting the Wi-Fi network that you set up for your gateway, just toggle this switch off and then hit save. Now it's important to notice here that it says that it can take up to 24 hours for this change to be made. So if you turn off this Xfinity Wi-Fi network, make sure you go in a day later and make sure that this still shows as being off. And when you go to the list of available Wi-Fi networks, you don't see Xfinity Wi-Fi. If the information in this video was all new to you and maybe you feel a little bit blindsided by this secondary Wi-Fi network, please go ahead and like the video. Liking the video will ensure that it gets spread to other people, so that way they'll have more awareness about this secondary Wi-Fi network and they can decide if they want to turn it off or not. As always, thanks for checking out this episode from Network from Home, and we'll catch you on the next one.